Hello, my reader friends. Spring is just around the corner, and that means it's time for some great new reads. Now, I've gathered up 10 of my most anticipated reads of the spring, so let's jump in. The first book I'm looking forward to is called Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. Now, this is about a boy named William who kind of had this life of sadness and neglect, but when he meets Julia in college, he is brought into the circle of her family, and he is really struck by how joyful everything is. Now, all of this new joy in William's life is threatened when something from his past causes this big rift in the family. I've heard such wonderful things about this book that's actually described as kind of an homage to Little Women, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. The next book I'm planning to read is called American Mermaid by Julia Longine. Now, this is about an English teacher who writes this feminist novel about this kind of androgynous eco-warrior mermaid. It becomes a bestseller, and then Hollywood comes calling. But then when she moves to LA, she's pressured to change her heroine into this kind of sex object that she objects to. And then it starts to seem that the feminist heroine is starting to take her own revenge on Hollywood. Now, this seems like it's going to be kind of funny and outrageous, and I think it'll be a good change of pace in my reading. The next book I'm looking forward to is called Community Board by Tara Conklin. Now, Tara Conklin is the author of The Last Romantics, which is this big family novel that I loved from several years ago. Now, this book is about this woman named Darcy who moves back to her hometown in Massachusetts when her life kind of goes south. She finds that things have changed there, and she kind of has trouble connecting to her hometown. So she tries to reconnect with the community by responding to anonymous posts online. I'm so curious how this is going to go, because I often find some of those local boards, like Nextdoor, to be some of the actual worst corners of the internet. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out. The next book I'm planning to read is called This Bird Has Flown by Susanna Hoffs. Now, this is actually the first novel by the lead singer of the Bangles. It's about this singer named Jane who had a hit 10 years ago but has had nothing since. So when she's on a flight to London, she meets this man named Tom, and she kind of instantly falls in love. And then she also starts feeling inspired again. But it seems like Tom might not be what he seems, and Jane needs to figure that out, as well as also find her confidence to step back into the limelight. Now, this book has been described by the author duo Christina Lauren as being a little bit romance, a little bit rock and roll, and it promises to have some kind of insidery music biz info from Susanna Hoffs. So I'm curious to see if she can deliver on a novel as well as she does on song. The next book I'm planning to read is called Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. This is about a young man named Harley who has quit college, and he's moved back home to his rural town in England. He's very depressed, and he's on the verge of making this really tragic decision until he's interrupted by his roommate, Muddy. Now, Muddy is kind of the polar opposite of Harley. He's presumed to be heterosexual, he's very freewheeling, he's very confident in himself and his masculinity, and he starts to show Harley some of the joys of life again. Their friendship, however, causes some complications in their larger friend group, which sort of drives the plot of this book. I really love books about unlikely friendships and found family, and I'm really looking forward to this one. The next book I'm excited to read is called With My Little Eye by Jocelyn Jackson. Now, this is a thriller by Jackson, and it's about a famous woman who seems to be the object of a stalker. So she moves her and her daughter across the country to get away from this stalker, but it seems like he might have followed, and now all of the men in her life who she knows are suspect, but she can't keep herself and her daughter safe until she figures out who this person actually is. This one seems really creepy, but I'm really looking forward to it because I love Jocelyn Jackson's sort of sly, witty voice that she brings to all of her novels. I have this in print, but if you can't get your hands on it in audio, I really recommend listening to it because Jocelyn Jackson does all of her own audio narration, and she is just fantastic. The next book I'll be reading this spring is called Lucky Girl by Irene Muchemi Nderitu. Now, this is about a wealthy young Kenyan woman in the 90s who flees her life in Kenya to move to New York. She's kind of got this life of privilege, but also lots of expectations. So she moves to New York to try to kind of find herself. But when she arrives there, she's kind of faced with questions of identity and privilege and belonging, and trying to figure out kind of where she actually belongs in the world. Now, this is a debut novel, and I'm really looking forward to exploring this perspective that's brand new to me. The next book I'm planning to read is called Late Bloomers by Deepa Varadarajan. Now, this is kind of touted as a light family novel about an Indian couple that splits up after 36 years of an arranged marriage. The husband in this couple starts online dating, while the wife is kind of surprised by these sudden attentions by this professor that's in her orbit. Their daughter doesn't really approve of what either of them are doing, but she's got her own relationship secrets. And so does their son, who seems to have this perfect marriage, but has some secrets kind of behind closed doors. Now, this is described as kind of a charming and big-hearted family novel, which is something I always like to mix into my reading. The next book I'm reading is The Half Moon by Mary Beth Keane. Now, she wrote the book called Ask Again Yes, which is another complex family novel that I really love. This time she's putting the lens on a couple in a small town who are navigating their marriage while trying to keep a business afloat and also trying to start a family. This is set over 1 week in a blizzard, which is just the kind of insular setting that I really love. It reminds me of the Anne Patchett novel Run, which is kind of one of her older under the radar novels. That's one of my favorites, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. The last one I'm sharing today is called The Wishing Game by Meg Sheffer. Now, this is about a young woman named Lucy who had kind of a sad childhood growing up, and she now works as a teacher's aide. And she really enjoys teaching her students about books and sharing her love of reading. And she gets really attached to this young 7-year-old who just lost his parents, and she's actually interested in adopting him. But she feels like she probably can't because her life is still kind of unstable. But when her favorite childhood author emerges from seclusion and announces that he has this new book, she's very excited at first, and then he announces that 4 select readers are going to compete for the only copy of this novel on his private island, and Lucy is one of those readers. She knows that this is her chance to win and sell the books so she can adopt Christopher, but first she has to win against these really determined opponents, and also this kind of weird game master in the author that's chosen her to compete. But this sounds really wild and weird and heartwarming and kind of Willy Wonka-like, and I can't wait to read it. Now, my TBR always has more books than I can get to, but these are 10 that I am definitely planning to get to this spring. Now, if you're curious what I think about these books after I read them, be sure to subscribe so that you can get notified when I post my next videos and my reviews. Let me know in the comments which of these you're planning to read and also what other books are on your spring reading list. Thanks for watching.